Hi folks, how's everyone doing?
Hello, folks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Greetings from Seattle.
Greetings back to Seattle.
Thanks, Hannes.
Okay, let's give folks a few more minutes. I will try to take the meeting notes again.
Take notes. That works for you.
Yeah, please help me on doing that. Is that what you were saying, Kieran?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's sometimes difficult to follow all the discussions. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I see Steve, Roy already joining, Ray, Ori, Nat. Neil, you are dropping in and out, at least from what I can see. I don't know if that's intentional. Hey, Hank. As I mentioned, it would be nice if we could get an agreement on the architecture, specifically the terminology aspects. And so thanks, Ray, for posting your write-up. That was obviously helpful. Maybe we should actually, someone should share the screen so we can have a look at this and discuss it a little bit and then come up with a way forward. Ray, can you hear me?
Yeah. So
Cool.
are you asking me to take a look at the document that I created? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, if you don't mind,
Okay,
you could
well,
share that document, share your screen and share the document.
Yeah. No, I don't mind doing that. No.
Cool.
It'd be fun to do that. Let me get it set up here.
So one other thing while you are doing this, the use case call for adoption will come to an end today. So far, a few of you responded. So I've only seen positive feedback. So I don't think that will radically change till the end of the day. And then we'll ask the authors to submit an IETF working group version of that document. I think that would be good.
This is Hank. As soon as there is a hack on the ML, then we are glad to do that.
Cool. Excellent.
I'm trying to find the share screen thing. What?
That is close to the microphone panel.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Okay.
On the left side?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And now it should work.
Yes. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Let's see. Just looking at some of the comments here. Okay, so do you want me to just start now?
Yeah, zoom in a little bit so it's bigger, but then go ahead.
All right. Let's see. It makes this bar bigger too, unfortunately. All right, so I'll go back one. So let me also put in the link, okay, in the chat room so that anyone can zoom
Hey,
in.
why don't you hide the menu bar there?
Yeah. Okay.
The little arrow, up arrow on the right. There we go.
Is that, oh, this too? Yeah, better.
There we go. Yep.
Okay.
Blow it
good.
up a little bit. That'd be great. It's quite hard to read, but
Yeah. Okay. So, oh yeah, here we go. Okay. Okay, so what I did here is just try to make a block diagram of what a real SCITT registry might look like, and putting in the blocks where, yeah, some of these blocks might be, in the ledger or not, but still there were things to think about in terms of, on the left, what a submitter might be needing to think about, and what on the right, what a registry viewer or transparency service type of thing would be showing from the registry. And, in terms of the exact, APIs and so forth, I wasn't trying to do it at that level. I'm just trying to look at what the big picture might be. And so, and some of these things kind of go to both sides, I think. But essentially on the submitter side, if I can just walk through some of these blocks, there would be users. Okay, so we'd have to have some sort of a user idea, and those would be like maybe the OpenID Connect controlled. And then there would be probably users with some sort of delegated authority to act for organizations. And an organization would be either a corporation or an unincorporated association of people maintaining open source of product. And an organization can have a set of product lines. And I didn't put it in here, but there's probably logically another block here called models, configurations of a product. And this is sort of mushy depending upon the application area about what a product line is or what a product is and what a release is. But in software, you might have something up here like Microsoft Windows or Access or something like this, and then there might be a configuration of that for a given type of platform, Linux or Windows type of thing, and then type of CPU, etc. And then a product release is also a concept in terms of having a semantic version and so forth. So the reason these are necessary is because a user on the other side here is going to need to refer to the product to get information about it. But let me just not jump ahead too far. Then there's some sort of pre-submission filter before something gets submitted to the ledger. And depending upon how this gets designed, you would want either to have a fairly, this is kind of like what you would think of as the e-notary, but it also would include kind of a title search too, because you're only going to want to submit things from an organization that actually owns that product line and product by a user with delegated authority to make the submission. Unless it was someone else maybe adding something to it, but certainly that's going to be the main type of operation. There may be post-submission validation services that add records to the ledger. And in my mind, I'm thinking that even though this ledger is an append only, maybe just a gigantic table with entries at the bottom, you would still, as you look into it, would logically see product line aggregations. And this part of it could be thought of as part of the registry, the product line aggregations or product release aggregation. Because when you look into the ledger, you don't want to see, all the entries distributed across one big table. You want to see an API here probably that says, like, give me the information about maybe all the products by the product lines by this organization. Maybe for this product line of that organization, tell me which releases there are. Maybe what of this release, tell me what the bill of materials is and any information. So you could put all this together and you'd say, well, for that release, it's this product line, it's this organization. Here's their public key. Here's the product line, link to that. And then that's maybe all. You would get the whole shebang, right? You big giant, block back. But in the ledger, it might be implemented some other way. So the reason this aggregation here and the product lines and stuff is more about how we would need to think about the structure of what's in the ledger so that it can be both, will mainly access later. So somebody needs to be able to stay in their mind what they want to get. So working back over here then on this registry viewer side, you have, as you look into the ledger through the API or however it's done, you would then be able to get aggregations of a given product release, for example. And then a business-to-business evaluation might be a user of this product, and then that would feed back here to their product saying, do we want to use this in our product, or let's update our bill of materials or something like that. And that could be at different levels of either after an evaluation. So these evaluations are logically, in my mind, not part of the ledger, are not part of the registry. But maybe additional services that would do verification and validation, or what Dick is always asking for, which is validating the end user app, saying, is this software trustworthy? And this block here would evaluate given a request from the ledger for that given product release, it would do something magic here and decide whether it was trustworthy. Okay, but the actual stuff in the ledger does not say this is trustworthy. All it gives you is all the information such that you can create this determination. Down here, then we also would have potentially a RATS entity, which could be an Internet of Things, or perhaps a piece of software loaded on a cloud service or something, and the verifier needs information to evaluate this, and then maybe that evaluation information is contained in the product release aggregation for that product. And not sure about this, but it was something I'm just starting to think about. And then, but certainly I think it applies. Then down here is the concept of a ledger registry, which probably should just say SCITT registry. So this is the registry of registries. And this would be something that would be probably, I think now I'm looking at it, part of what the the B2B or end user evaluation blocks here would need to use, because they're not necessarily going to be able to refer to a single registry to be able to get their information. They may be looking at various, registries that are maintained either by the given manufacturers, which I kind of anticipate will be common, or some kind of like main registry if there happens to be some sort of Amazon.com sort of place that everybody goes to. I'm not saying Amazon.com, but just that concept of everybody buys their stuff from one place now. So the ledger, as I was showing it here, would have a is an append only, like secure data table perhaps, and very likely maybe something like the QLDB offering by AWS or other cloud service providers have the same type of thing. And in your mind, you can think of this as as basically a database table or tables. Then it's limited though. Okay, so the registry entries in such ledger offerings are limited to maybe 400 megabytes per entry. So you can't, which is pretty big, but it's not, big enough for many like container type of things. For example, the containers on AWS are limited to 10 gigabytes right now. So certainly it would not be able to run as a container registry itself. But then you would have bulk storage that would be related to the ledger and probably co-located in the same data center or data centers, wherever this is. And then you would have some things down here, which is external storage anywhere, which could be referred to by the ledger. And, you could pick that up over the internet. Of course, then you have to think about whether that is going to be secure enough for the application. Like you want to guarantee that it's not going to be deleted, then you probably want to put it on this associated bulk storage. There could be, yeah. You want me to stop?
There are a few people already in the queue.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't watching.
Yeah.
I got it on to the wrong. Let's see. I got to go up to the top to see the people's hands.
No.
Let me just say these last few items here,
Okay.
and then I'll be done. Okay. So
Cool.
this private storage only available for comparison challenges is if you have, say, a binary of a piece of software that you cannot release to the public or don't want to, and yet you still want to allow it to be challenged by users to say, is this the golden version? And here is a challenge it with the nonce, and then you wouldn't have to look at it to see if it's the same. And then the certification authority is something that's here. So I guess I'm done. All right, so I got to move this up so I can see. Okay, here we go.
I can tell you, Steve is first.
All right.
Really helpful.
Steve, do you want to? You're still on mute.
You can hear me, can you? Damn it.
Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I think we're all struggling with the meeting echo. Anyway, so thanks for putting this together. It really helps. We were talking last time around that we were zoomed in tightly just for a particular terminology, but to be able to zoom out and see more of the workflows puts more context to everything. And it resonates really well with the things we've also been discussing around, things that will be on the ledger versus external ledger to keep the size constraints down, to things that are already in other storage systems that we need to link to. So I think it speaks well to all of those pieces. The one piece that I was trying to understand a little bit more was a couple of pieces, but the first one was in the drawing. My first perspective of it was on the left was the producers, on the right was the consumers, not consumers as in individuals that buy products, but anybody that reads and writes, reads the APIs, meaning I'm consuming information from a SCITT configuration. What confused me a little bit is what the box is. So if somebody stands up a SCITT instance, what is it that would be assumed to be inside of that versus external to it? And one of the things, for instance, you've got transparency service in the box to the right, and I was reading the box to the right as being the consumption part. So I was thinking transparency service would be the piece in the middle, the actual SCITT instance. And then the only other piece I'll just leave with it and let you answer or discuss. I also think of there's a perimeter, if you will, of circumference, where at the very core, there's the SCITT specs that says, this is what makes, for a SCITT instance. Then there's a concentric circle outside of that, that any project, product, or service that implements SCITT would add some value on top of those specs and the standards. So when you think of email, there's an email spec, but every email server has additional capabilities that they add, but it's wrapped around those existing specs. So I can still send and receive email, but inside the email client, I might see more functionality and so forth. So I was just kind of curious on how you were thinking this drawing relates to what a SCITT instance would be from the specs to a particular product, how producers and consumers would work with it, and where you saw some of those boundaries.
Okay. Yeah. So in my mind at this point, I'm thinking that that these boxes over here are actually just, well, it depends on how you want to implement it, but certainly you need to know like who can submit to the ledger, and you need to know the organizations. Those could be part of the ledger. In other words, you could have ledger entries that say, let organization X, here's the public key, here's the address, blah, 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 all of the schema things that, fields. And I did add down in the document here some of the things that the schema.org has the descriptors for organizations, and there's also this ISO standard for the structure of the information, blah, blah, blah. It turns out, I think this is the way things are going, is the EB Core Party ID type technical spec by the Oasis. And because fairants.com now just jumps into this. And so essentially what you could have in this concept here is that, for example, the organization would be perhaps a SCITT claim that says, I'm this organization and here's my information. And if that's all you wanted, you'd say, tell me about this organization. That's what you'd get. If you said, tell me all the product lines that are tagged with this organization, you would get those entries in the ledger just at the level of a product line. You could say, tell me all the product releases, regardless of what product line maybe, or of a given product line. So it would be kind of like look up, capabilities of looking up in the table. So these things here are just the required concepts, okay, regarding how the registry would need to work, because you need the concept of an organization, unless you have the unaffiliated user, and so which could be just sort of like a shell organization with nothing in it around a user, so it could be the same thing. But then within what we normally think of as an organization, like a big one like Microsoft or something, then there's users with delegated authority for a given product line or maybe a given release that is tagged with having the authority to make the submission through the submission filter. And so there's some operational things that you would have to deal with here in order to have what you might call an e-notary. Okay. And I was trying to break that up as to like, okay, we talk about e-notary, but what is it? And I think it's this pre-submission filter of saying, okay, well, it's the organization with the product line and the release. And I've got all that either by looking in the ledger and seeing that I've already put in an organization and a product line, but then you'd also have to have kind of the lower level user front end here for anybody who's actually like given the authority to access the API or to use this thing, that has to be a kind of, it can't be part of the API itself. I guess you could look at it that way, but that's sort of a separate part of the system. Now this part over here, the product line aggregations, is actually kind of an, I think, a nothing box here, because if you did this right, because the ledger would be able to actually provide the aggregations if it's designed right. Okay, so if the ledger is designed such that you could say, I want all of the records regarding this product release, then the ledger would be able to pull those out. But you'd better be aware of the fact that people are going to be wanting to access it that way. They don't want they don't want to see the vast, expanse of this ledger with all of the entry. They want to see just the specific entries for this product release or for this product line, find out which releases there are. So there needs to be some way of like saying, okay, for this release and this aggregation, tell me the information for that. Now that can be very easy if you have this ledger, designed right, but you need to have that, because then I think the line would be drawn after this. So if I was going to draw a box around the registry, it would include the aggregations, would not probably include the verifier, could not include the ledger registry because that's not part of it. Would include the bulk storage. Maybe, I don't know, I guess can't use the private storage, but it would then include most of this over here as just so. But I would say there's the line should be drawn like right there. These end user apps would be logically not part of it. So this is where I think I'm trying to support what Dick wants, because I think it's really important, but it's not part of the actual registry itself. It's like one step beyond that. I see a bunch of hands, so I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah. So one aspect that we discussed earlier was really about the right-hand side, what you have closer to the end user, like is this software trustworthy, the peer-to-peer evaluation. That's something we said last time, that would be another layer, something on top of it. So in my opinion, based on the discussions we had earlier, this wouldn't be part of this entire box, what you did label as SCITT registry at all. I
agree with that.
Okay.
That the line should be, but it depends on what you want to put into your service. In other words, this could be part of the service, but it's a different layer above the raw data right here.
But keep in mind what the purpose of this whole drawing is. And we have a lot of examples to look at from other working groups. Is kind of the boxes represent things that we really find important for the minimum amount of work that we are doing, just to give sort of the reader an idea like what the minimalistic version looks like. And as Steve said, like there is like with the email service, there's obviously lots of other things in a real product for a variety of reasons, which we would then add on top of it. And I think that would belong to that category. Likewise, on the left-hand side, you distinguish between identities or users of individual users rather than users that are sort of acting on behalf of a corporation. And I think that could be lumped together in one box that says like something like identity information or authentication, or I don't know, something like this. And then in the text, it talks about these aspects. And also,
I did put this bigger box around that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are lumped together.
And then also when you talk about the product lines and the product releases, given like we also spoke about like the ledger itself, or wouldn't distinguish or wouldn't look into the details of what's actually submitted. So there may be lots of different things, and the queries may be operating, maybe able to find information at a different level of granularity, whether that's an aggregate or something that is really detailed. And that may be all sorts of things, not just product lines and product releases. And in some sense, those are the artifacts, in my opinion. But and whether that could also be a little bit abstract the way. But yeah.
Let me just comment on that last point, and actually on that first point too. I do agree that I should draw this box differently, so I'll do that. I kind of did it this way because if I didn't put this box around it, then it would cut the end user in half. So, so I will move that over, and I think you're right. And then this already have the user inside here, but the reason I think this is pretty important, and I don't think you can get rid of the concept of product lines and releases and stuff, is because the ledger will need to be able definitely to find product lines and releases. You can have as much other information as you want, and this doesn't necessarily mean that the information block or whatever is not just one big opaque block for many. Like you could have a lower level here where you have just a ledger with you know, a big open space for anybody to put it in there, and then one hash value, something like that. That's certainly possible, but if you're going to filter what goes in, then I think you have to have the concept of an owner, and then you have to say what it is to the extent that these users over here will be able to say, I want information about this, which is outside the concept of the ledger, because it has to be like world information that says, here's an organization, I know their name and their product line and the release, and I have that. And then that's everything else can be below whatever these people need to access it. That's, I think, a minimum, but it's certainly up for discussion. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Charles is in the queue. Charlie?
Sorry, extra steps here. So thanks for putting this together, Ray. This is very interesting. I think it's a probably workable flow chart. I just don't think it looks that much like SCITT as we've discussed it. And maybe we need to make some changes there. But so first thing I would say is the user thing is terrific. That is absolutely critical. I don't know whether that's part of the ledger or not, but it is definitely required functionally. The other thing I would say is that remembering that these are supplied goods, not necessarily just software. First of all, the software problem of aggregating and product lines and identifiers and so on and so forth is extremely difficult, and we probably don't want to try to solve it here. The other thing that sort of jumped out at me was that I think there's a lot of data that almost has to be in the ledger that's in the right-hand box. The RATS stuff, for example, I don't know about the product release, but I think that's got to be in there too. I don't think the software, title or product line hierarchy is really intrinsic. In fact, I think that's almost a reference thing that could be included in, some single entry by the organization. And the final thing that I wanted to mention is that, so I guess what I think is that ledger is going to be a lot bigger. And the second thing, the last thing was, there's the certification authority, I think is a little bit of a magic happens here box, and it's perfectly okay at this stage of the game. But there's a lot going on in there as well. So just those are my comments.
I didn't quite.
For the meeting minutes, quickly, I missed the point that you said about RATS, the RATS entities. What it's about those?
They should be in the ledger, no?
Okay.
No, I don't think the RATS entity can be in the ledger. That is like either a piece of software running in the cloud or on an IoT device or something that is not an end user, but a
But the verifier, though, I mean, isn't there identifier in there that
this
is
verifier I think
instantiated
would
by
be a
RATS?
user of the information in the ledger, and in order to, for a given product release, would get information about how to verify the entity, I think.
But where's the verifier of
The
these various
verifier
things?
is not in my mind, is not actually in the registry. This is the registry viewers of the transparency service. So I was thinking that this entire box was outside, initially outside of the ledger and of the registry itself, which was kind of the line here. But I think now looking at it, this part here would be more inside the box. But the verifier seems like it is not part of the SCITT registry. It would be a user of the data. And I didn't understand what you said. You'd say it would be a lot bigger, the ledger or something.
Yeah, there's a lot more data in there than I think the left-hand box. And maybe you've agreed already on that, but I think that.
So
Charlie.
guys, can I just interject for a second? Because we're already nearly 40 minutes in, and there's a long queue. Each of these short questions is soliciting very long answers, and I wonder if we might be better served by getting the questions and comments kind of out. Because I've got one, Roy's got one, Neil and Henk have just joined the queue. Is everyone okay if we kind of get the comments and questions out and then get them all addressed kind of together? Because I think that's going to be more efficient.
Okay, I'll make it as you do it. I'll write them down so I got them.
Yeah, and I think that hopefully that will make it easier for Hannes to write down on the minutes as well. So we'll make sure the things are captured and then we can attack them. Because I fear we're going to have very similar comments and you'll just end up answering the same question like 5 times.
Yeah, good point. That's fine.
So sorry to interject, but I just want to keep the time. So Charlie, are you done?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine with that approach. I guess the overarching comment I want to make is this is quite a different block diagram than the one we have in the architecture doc.
Actually, there's a distinction here between a product and what's in the IETF. I have no problem with what was written here by Ray. There's a few little nuances in here that I wanted to talk about, which we can cover off. If we do our jobs right with the ledger and the receipts generates, then the trust in the content is a simple check of the receipt. The deeper audit, as a result of that, goes against the ledger, and that should be a lot smaller subset of people doing those operations. So when I normally draw this, I put the e-notary inside the SCITT and say, hey, the queries are against the storage for SCITT, not the ledger. But that's a nuance and a subtlety that Ray's drawn here. Charles, there is some comments here on RATS. On the production side, you could envision a model where we finally get to the machine that's doing the production has to submit RATS evidence into the system. So as an audit, we can make sure the machine wasn't hijacked. As to whether the customers on the other side get to see the RATS information seems to follow between a boundary that we have to decide whether is OSS code shows this or whether big companies provide their RATS attestation of their machines and that in itself gives some evidences where the things are running.
Yeah.
There's some subtleties future on with what Ray was talking about that I think we've mentioned before, which is the queries against the data. You probably want the last of a specific type from a certain specific supplier, like seeing the anti-mal where you're really kind of interested in the last result, not necessarily the previous 2,000 results.
Right. Yeah. I also think of Bob's seafood example. I have to run actually, but I think this is a great start, Ray. I really appreciate the kind of teasing out of some of the issues here. I think we're really going to get to the details now.
So basically what I'm thinking here is what you've written as ledger, I think more of SCITT the product, and the actual talking to the ledger to do the deeper audit is what we've put in the working group and so forth as a building block. The certificate authority, as I think is raised, and Charles mentioned, is just there. But if it's against the receipt and we're moving towards something else, then still conceptually sits there as somebody has to have policy of who they trust. Those are the only comments I had, Ray. Thanks for doing this.
Okay.
John, I think you're next.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, so thank you. I would echo that I think we need to tease these issues out, and these are indeed the issues that are often raised mostly by Dick. But I do think we need to find ways of keeping the specifics out of SCITT, as we've mentioned. It's not necessarily just software. Even when we're talking about software supply chain, there are many other types of artifacts and products and claims that need to be transported. And I'm wondering why we can't use the feed concept that's already in the spec to do this kind of search and differentiation. And if we can't, whether we should.
Okay.
That's my comment. Neil?
Great. So I agree. I see this diagram as being helpful in the same sort of way that use cases are to frame the functionality from a user perspective. And so that's helpful. I think Steve has done a great job in the document, Google Doc, of connecting some of the points back to the architecture and the issues. And I think we would be most productive if we tried to get back to that and look at specific issues, specific text in the document, and use this to kind of frame those issues like scalability. So, this whole concept of a feed, exactly as John said, already exists in the architecture. It seems to relate very closely to this notion of how a user would find product lines that are of interest to them and so on. So I would suggest that we move back to that. In general, I think, I don't know if there's already an issue related to scalability. I think it would be helpful to do something along this line that tried to estimate, how can this thing scale to what I guess we all would hope and dream that, it's used for kind of everything that you care about with supply chains, which is like everything in the world, folks. So curious to try to move the discussion back to issues on the document.
Neil, when you talk about the document from Steve, which document specifically are you referring to? To the architecture document or to some other document? Steve has
the architecture document. As I saw it, Steve has a whole bunch of comments on the right that say, yeah, this thing is in issue 11 or issue 17, as we were discussing last week. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, the issue tracker. Okay.
Linking Ray's, elucidation of kind of some user challenges to the existing draft that I guess what, we're trying to get a revised draft published before the meeting or something. What's our timing on that, and how can we help improve it? And in particular, this whole transparent, the terminology discussion, I was reading the document as edited by, I forget who, to be more precise with terminology. And I think getting that adopted, because I think it's helpful, would help everybody review it.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, is that the link to the issues that were just mentioned? I want to copy the link over.
Yeah, so what I was just trying to do was, as Ray was going through the doc, I was just trying to capture what is already captured in the issues so we don't lose new points. So basically, the doc is great. I actually put a link to the doc in one of the issues. There's a full loop around it. But it was just, to Neil's point, as we're going through it, you just don't want to lose the conversation as notes in this particular meeting. Any action items goes back to issues we have on the architecture doc.
Okay. To make sure that I put the correct link into the meeting minute, can you post it again so I copy it over?
You want the link to this document?
No. The link to the issues that Steve.
Hey, Hannes, it's
Yep.
already captured. We put it under Steve's like notes on there when he posted the first time. So I put it on the notes.
You put it there. I can't see the link.
Yeah. If you scroll all the way to Steve comment, we have there.
Oh, okay.
Issues 18. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you. Next one, Henk.
Sorry, I'm muted. Hi, this is Hank. Yeah, so I understand why RETS is in the diagram. I think RETS entity is all things RETS has to offer, so that has to be more specialized, more narrow. I think all of these boxes can benefit from some RETS roles, and I would maybe in the very first iteration remove them, so we can add them at a later step when it is more consistent from the point of view of SCITT, I think. Ray, if that is, if you're comfortable with that, we will re-add them, but I think in more places and more consistently. Okay?
Okay, so let me try to just quickly respond as needed to some of these. Yeah, I did not try to start from the existing architecture and modify it. What I did was say, okay, clean slate, what's it going to have to look like? And then went from there. And these boxes, as I was trying to say, don't actually necessarily represent real things, but are just concepts within what has to go into the ledger, or how the information needs to be managed so that you can check things that are going in or coming out. I do think that you're not going to be able to get away from some sort of specification of, say, organizations, and offer for them to categorize their entries such that they can be easily looked up and however that is. And I think that for most software and hardware things, in fact, most products in general, they have these concepts that have been outlined by many schema organizations like schema.org and this ISO standard for talking about organizations and product lines and releases. So I think those will have to be in there somehow. So to just say, okay, we're going to have an empty box and anything can go in there, you could do it that way. But then you'd have to add this stuff later. And you can do, that's one way to approach it, is to say, okay, we're going to have one big empty box with nothing in it except just a hash code. And then you start adding this stuff in, and you add just a minimum of maybe a few things like this organization product line and stuff just to fill that in. And then allow so much specification for contact names and street address and all that. I certainly don't want to define any of that. But the certificate, so these things on the right could also be submitting back into the ledger, certainly. I just was thinking these were mainly going to be recipients of information that was submitted. So if you do want to run a RATS entity, you are going to be some sort of a organization, submitting stuff in the ledger such that these can be verified like that. The feed concept, I don't actually fully understand yet, so I'll have to take a look at that to see, but it's probably the same as this, looking at what comes out of the ledger here. Yes, this is not supposed to replace the work on the existing documents or anything. This is more of a sort of a fill in the gap between the use cases and the architecture, to make sure that we say, okay, here's our kind of our use case. At the very high level, we talked about those. This is sort of a mid-level addressing between like the use case a little bit more concretely, and then trying to understand what an e-notary might have to do on this side, especially. And then the RATS thing, and a lot of these things are not like, I could try to put arrows around all kinds of things here or put RATS in each deal. No, I didn't do that because I wanted to try to make it simple. So this is just the largest sky view, like what are the big features that are, I think, are going to have to be like included in the concept. Because, for example, if you design your ledger without the concept of knowing what the product models and releases are, it's going to be hard to look through it. It's going to be hard to create these product line aggregations, because the users over here are going to want to say, I have this organization's product from the release, give me all the information about it so I can make my evaluation. So I'm trying to look at, this is the actual use for the kind of use cases that Dick was talking about. We also had the B2B evaluations of people trying to use a product in their product. And so instead of showing it as a chain, this has a feedback loop going to the next user. I think that's all of the answers that I had.
Thanks, Ray. The question for the last few minutes, 8 minutes or so, is going to be on how can we update the document to capture some of the discussions we just had, and also the email exchange, to produce a new document version which reflects some of that terminology, as well as the sort of like what you call sky view. Steve, do you have a view on that?
Well, I was actually going to say what you basically just said is, what are the action items from this? Because I think there's two pieces to this. One, as we were discussing the architecture terminology, one of the things we were balancing was the technical accuracy and the practicality of how you could convey this to consumers. Because when I say, well, to the average layman that wants to be able to use this service as part of their secure supply chain. So I think one side of the surface that, Ray was, when he's going through the doc, used certain terminology that may or may not have fit the current terminology. That's a good example where you need to fix that. There's others where I think he was introducing some great concepts, like whether the aggregate of others. Do we have those things captured in the architecture? Should they be tracked as new issues so that we can, continue to chip away at this? Or are they external concepts that are, on top of, like that might even be a product specific use case, or it might just be a particular use case of a standard SCITT registry. Thanks, Ray, for putting this together, but to your point, Thomas, is let's track the action items and issues, and then link back to this doc. But this way we have the issues on the issues on the architecture doc as our indexing of how to make sure we don't lose.
Yeah. Well, practically speaking, we have till next Monday to submit an architecture version. So the reason why we started this discussion about this box was because it was related to the question about like how the whole thing should be called, and that may well, it seems that question hasn't really been answered by this diagram, but it gave us a couple of additional issues to think about. So capturing those issues, I think, is important. But on the positive note, in terms of advancing the document and having something to submit by next Monday, we also had some agreement on some of the terminology, as I have seen. So that's fantastic. And the other things will have to be worked out. And thanks, Steve, for capturing some of those open issues. And I have some more from today's meeting in the meeting minutes as well. Neil.
Put in the chat, I think it would be helpful if we accepted the pull request on vast terminology overhaul, just because in my opinion, it cleans a bunch of things up pretty effectively, and it's hard to read the document. If that's the case, if we want it, it just makes it easier to read the document because there's an official version of it that's available. So is there pushback on that general thrust? There's been a lot of commentary on it. It just seems like there's still stuff to tweak, but it would make sense to get that back in the main line of the repo.
Yeah.
So this is Hank. I might have an answer to this, to make at least a suggestion. I think, yes, it's worthwhile to merge now because it becomes a little bit clunky. It's vast. Also, I want to highlight that Ori, you, Ned, and Steve made valuable contributions that are captured as comments, not only as change requests. Also, some of the change requests, for example, coming from Ori, have to be discussed. I think most of them are sane, but I think people have to agree. And so merging the pull requests might make them less visible for now. So please keep in mind a merged pull request like this, like 16, will include a ton of good suggestions that we will have to unearth again. Okay, so they're not gone or ignored, especially down below where Ned commented a lot. And he's not here anymore in this call about normative language and such. They're not ignored if you pull it without addressing them, okay? I think we have to make that very clear.
Hank, can we capture anything that wasn't already added to your PR? Like any of the comments that are open issues, can we just create an issue out of those so that we don't lose the details?
It's a ton. I would say these are like 30 to 40 issues.
Okay.
Easily capturing them is not something we can do if we want to have a publishable ID next week, Monday. Yes, we should do that. But I think Ori's, because he provided suggestions, hint, hint, that's a cool idea. These are the easiest to address. So I give them the best chance to be in the Monday version. The others really have to become issues, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I'm traveling back today, so I can see what I can do to help capture the loose ends in the next couple of days.
Cool, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think if we merge that BR, we definitely have to keep some issues open, specifically on the transparency service, which triggered this whole debate. So it's obviously work in progress, but I think I agree with Neil that we need to sort of like create a version of the document, a snapshot that captures at least to some extent our understanding. And thanks to everyone who has sort of contributed to the text in that document. So. But I think what we could ask for, like, it's obviously there's not enough time to go through this now, to the BR now, but it's basically a request to everyone to have a look at that BR and to indicate like whether they are kind of happy with this merging with it and sort of capturing the open issues, knowing that there would be lots of open issues. So we can move forward and then tackle the open issues one by one. Okay. I didn't hear anyone screaming. Or my audio.
From my
I'll try to do
perspective,
that. I'm going to try to look at that more carefully after I did this view.
Yeah.
Now I think I can provide some better feedback to the exact document we're working on. Thanks.
Well, Ray, your contribution was extremely valuable because it made us talk about the different components, and we have a bunch of open issues, and we obviously there's an agreement on some of the aspects. So we need to then see how we best fold in like the whole identity discussion, user authentication, etc., whatever you want to call it, for example. So that's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, should we, I mean, are we going to merge it right away, or should we, if we want to tweak it, should we have pull requests that build on that particular branch, or like, how do we try to make progress in the next week?
Yeah. Let me do the following. I will look through and reach out to some of the folks who contributed and see whether they are okay with it. From the immediate feedback, I don't get sort of like, I didn't hear anyone screaming. So it looks pretty good, but I don't want to ignore someone's feedback, and I haven't checked the latest sort of issues there. So there was a lot of discussion on that PR. Does that make sense? But your request is obviously super timely, given that we have the draft submission deadline upcoming next Monday. So we need to do something sooner rather than later, and we can still make further progress before the IETF meeting itself, after the deadline. Okay, good. We are out of time. So I would say thank you all for the discussion, and thanks, Ray, for leading today's sort of description of the terminology and the architectural building blocks, and thank you, Steve, for capturing issues and for advancing that work.
Yeah, thanks for letting me present this. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks a lot. Good, Ray. See you later.